Well, I think the failure in that battle was a function of both courageous, rapid Ukrainian operations, soldiers who demonstrated initiative, leaders who rode to the sound of the guns, as they say, and exercised initiative to make sure that the Russians could not establish a sufficient airhead at that airport. And also, frankly, of the lack of execution by the Russian forces. To put this in perspective, this is a very common operation. In fact, the units in which I was privileged to command, the 101st Airborne Division Air Assault, and the 82nd Airborne Division, these are organizations that focus on seizing airfields. The 101st Airborne Division by air assault, by helicopters, the 82nd Airborne Division by parachute operations. And they've done it. And our airborne and air assault forces have done that routinely in recent decades. If you think about the seizure of the international airport in Panama, or the smaller airfield that was seized by the Rangers in the Panama operation, the seizure of the airfield in Afghanistan by the Rangers, by the 173rd Airborne in northern Iraq during the invasion of Iraq. Again, we always want airfields so that we can rapidly bring in, we want to airland more forces so that you can reinforce an airhead, and so that you can begin bringing in not just additional soldiers, but additional weapon systems, and above all, additional logistics. But of course, these objectives can only survive for so long unless they're able to bring in more, and there is a ground link up. And of course, in this case, the very swift action by Ukrainian forces, the rapid response and the courageous response to the attempt to seize Hostomel, and the superb defense that prevented ground forces of Russia from linking up with the Russian forces at the airfield, meant that the Russians were unable to achieve their objective. So again, this is an operation that should be put into historic context. It's the kind of operation that militaries have conducted for many, many decades since we've been able to conduct airborne operations and air assault operations. It could have been very important had the Russians been able to establish, to seize and hold that airfield and establish it as a base into which they could bring more soldiers, more weapon systems, more arms, ammunition, supplies, food, water, fuel, you name it, because, of course, of its proximity to Ukraine. But once again, poor execution by the Russians, superb execution by Ukrainian forces meant that that operation failed. It was a defeat that contributed, of course, to the ultimate defeat of the Russians in the Battle of Kiev.